Welcome to Ethical Edge Insights, Conversations with ChangeMakers, a space for deeply reflective conversations with those shaping our world. Here we explore their journeys, their greatest challenges, their most significant contributions to date, the contributions they seek to make, and how ethics have shown up along the way. Join us as we uncover the stories that shape our shared future. So, Pamela, we've made it here. End of my day, beginning of your day.
Definitely the beginning of my day. I'm a late riser. I take my time. I make my breakfast. I do all the things before I go into the, grind of the day. So
So thank you for coming to have a chat with me. And I'm going to enjoy this because, every other chat that we've had has been fun. So I'm expecting to experience a whole heap of joy.
absolutely.
So, do you want to tell us some about you and where you began with your career? So, kind of introducing yourself, but giving a historical account as well and what inspired you to be where you are.
Sure. It's interesting because a lot of what I've been talking about lately has involved plot twists. And it's occurred to me that my life has been a series of plot twists. And that's probably everybody's life. But I will say that I started off in a very traditional family. Dad went off to work, mom stayed home, raised me and my brother, very close-knit family, church going, all it just kind of a very traditional, stable household. Plot twist, when I was 18, I got really frustrated with my parents' very strict ways. And I was trying to go away to college. There was a lot of things. I was an athlete. Um, and I remember my parents forbidding me to date a guy that I was actually in the process of trying to break up with, to be perfectly honest. But I'm 18 years old and you can't tell me that I can't see anybody. So long story short, I got pregnant when I was 18 years old. And so there was the plot twist, family, stability, happiness, it just turned completely upside down. Dad, who's a minister in the church, mom who, was home and was like, I've tried to instill all the great values. So I really flipped our household. We all did this together on our heads and a sudden plot twist. Um, I ended up pursuing college anyway as a single mom. My son was 10 months old when I re-enrolled into college. At that point, my parents said, yep, you got this. This is on your own. We're not paying for anything. Figure it out. And it is exactly what I had to do. I figured it out. And so that really laid the foundation for what my adulthood was going to be like. Um, Figuring out life with a young child, pushing through all the goals I had already created for myself. I knew I wanted education. I knew I wanted a family life that I had when I was growing up. Which, by the way, after kind of seeing the entirety of my child rearing years as a mom, never played out. I am about to be an empty nester. My daughter is about to graduate high school. So I did get married for a short time and I had a second child, a daughter, and she is about to graduate. And so that vision of that family that I always thought I would have, it didn't happen because I was divorced 5 years later. So plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. But I have to say that what I have been able to create out, sort of the counter plot twists that I've been able to create have been absolutely, I wouldn't change it for the world. The life that I've been able to live in this first young adulthood part of my life as I step into more of they call it middle age, but I have perspectives about that. It's been amazing to see what I've been able to do with those plot twists through the communities and the people I've had, including my parents, who we have all since mended our relationship.
Lovely. They must be incredibly proud of you having sent you off to walk that pathway on your own. And then you said, well, guess what, guys? I made it work.
Yes. And they figured that out probably about a year after I left, and they saw, boy, she really is going to school. She really is doing these things. And it got me curious about how people lead themselves. So when I went to my master's degree program, I majored in college student affairs because I wanted to help people figure out the college path the way I had to. And
Mm.
then when I pursued my PhD, I pursued it in leadership with the thought I want to explore this idea of self-leadership
Mm.
and how people become leaders of themselves. Um, you know, that's one, we always talk about leaders of organizations and so forth, but what does it mean to lead yourself? So I remember in my PhD interview, the admissions interview, why are you pursuing this degree? Because I want to help people and I want to understand more fully the idea of leading yourself. I never have used that language, since being in the PhD program, but I think the work I do enjoy does exactly that.
Mhm. Interesting. So then you've gone through, you got your PhD, and
And I get divorced. Literally, maybe 2 months after I walk across the stage, I realize that this isn't going to work. And I get a divorce. I move back to my parents' house. So here I am 12 years later after I left my parents' house, coming back, and they were amazing because they said, come here, live here for a year, get your bearings, and then take off again and fly. And that's exactly what happened. I told them, look, in exchange for my staying here, I will cook for you. and and it really just solidified our just our relationship, the respect they had for me as an adult and the honor I had for them as parents who laid an amazing foundation for me. So I moved and I became a professor. I got my first position as a college professor, and I ended up staying at that university for 12 years. I gained tenure. I began really diving into my research, and what I wanted to create was a situation where I can be the most present parent possible. So I wanted a career that had the flexibility that allowed me to do that. And the professorship did exactly that for me.
mm, is that where you are now?
Yes. And so I'm at a different university now, but yeah, now I'm a professor of leadership. I was a professor of research at the last university. I actually just realized I still have the label professor of leadership on some, of research, on some materials because I really adored that position. I really loved that title and being able to usher students through their research process, which I still do, because it's a leadership doctoral program. So I'm the qualitative advisor for most part. Um, but yeah, so I'm still doing that work, and it is what has allowed me to do all the other things that I do. As a professor, you're expected to dive into your research and to write and to explore. And I'm grateful to have been at universities that um, allow me the autonomy to do that, and not only the autonomy to do the work, but to move in the direction that the work is taking me, because some people might frown upon joy, like, why are you studying joy, what is this? But I've had nothing but support, from where I am.
I think your paper in the Journal of Coaching Ethics published last year is one of the, if it's not the highest ranking one, it's up there with the one or two rankings in terms of accessing, reading, and downloading. So
Wow.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Love that.
and so you're also connected with the Institute of Coaching?
Yes. Plot twist. So I have a mentor who, he was my professor when I was in my master's degree program. And right away, I mean, in that program, I had my 6-year-old son sitting in class with me at times. So, um, but right away, he said, I want to help, um, sort of support you as you build your career. He was our research professor, and he loved my writing and said, I want to help develop that. And so he had become my mentor just throughout my master's degree program and beyond. So still to today, he's the president of Bemidji State University nowadays. And he, after I got my PhD, I told him, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? I'm actually looking at pursuing a master's degree in coaching. And there's a program that focuses on forgiveness. And I'm really interested in this program. And he looked at me and he said, if I was a professor in that PhD program, I would not want you in my class. You have a PhD. You have a coach training company. Why would you want to go get a master's degree? And I explained all my reasons, and he didn't agree. And he said, look, I will write the letter for you. But I think what you need to do is find an academic body of scholars who are studying and diving into the work that you want to dive into. Um, and I said, that's fine. Thank you for the letter. And I was going to submit that letter and the application, but I did what he said. I Googled and I looked, where are the academic bodies of scholars who are diving into coaching?
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, Institute of Coaching comes up, and instantly I realized this is where I need to be. So I never did submit the application to that university. I still have his letter of recommendation. And I joined the Institute of Coaching, and I was a fellow. And um, I ended, and one of the first things I noticed was, wow, I would love to see more people of color. I would love to see a broader, because this was me attending one of the conferences. And I said, I want to be involved and I'm going to help address that somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the opportunity came up, and the Institute of Coaching, they reached out to me initially for a director of research position. And Angela and I both applied for that job. They loved both of us. And because they know my background's education, they ended up hiring me as director of education and Angela as director of research. And I was able to then start working on initiatives that were focused on how do we attract people from a wide range of backgrounds. And not that that didn't exist already, but when we specifically talk about um, race, how many people of different racial backgrounds are aware of the Institute of Coaching? And then what are we doing within to make sure that that is being nurtured and that people are learning from one another? And so that's one of the ways in which I really love that we've expanded and really have had focused attention on. So that's what and that's not the whole of what I do, but it is one of the things that I said I really want to be a part of the growth and diversity at the Institute of Coaching. And I love what I've been seeing over the last few years, and not just from my own efforts, but really bringing together the minds and the people that have already been a part of the Institute who also have that same passion. And this includes the directors. And so it's just, so that's just been what I do. So director of education is what I do. And so anything related to educational opportunities, seminars, webinars, even resources is kind of my realm there.
Is there anything else we don't know about you?
Oh gosh.
We'll contain it to the current professional space.
Right. Well, I've written a few books, and the one that is right here over my shoulder is it's called Joyfully Single, and it is the book that contains my joy framework. And so I decided to marry two different worlds together, one of which addresses the single life and what it means to be single in this day and age, especially during and post-COVID. Single people were definitely struggling in unique ways during that time. But myself, having become single after divorce, and a coach, I have worked with a lot of people who have just kind of had that experience and are either still grieving or have given up on partnership, or they're just all in different places. So as I started developing my work on joy, I decided to allow the single the I guess the experience of being single to be sort of the backdrop of how I would talk about joy. So that's where it kind of was first introduced to the world, was from that framework. But by no means am I any kind of love and relationship matchmaker. That's definitely not my world. I can just apply the joy lens to a lot of different contexts. And so this happened to be the first. But the other book I have that I think I've been talking about or utilizing the most is the Practice of Joy workbook. And that has my framework as well. And then one other thing I will just throw in here, as I talk about my professional life, I am also a professional athlete, and I am a
Update me.
I am a member of, so the WNFC is the Women's National Football Conference in the United States. It is American football, not what we call soccer. So it's just to clarify what sport I'm talking about. And it's full tackle. And I'm a running back. And I just joined the team October. Plot twist, did not know I was going to try out, but I went out for the team. I am 48 years old. I am the oldest person on the team. And I made the team. So it is, yeah. So my life is rich. My life has a lot of different dynamics.
I love that story. I love that you've found your way back into sports in this way.
Yes, it was it was sort of that unfinished, dream. So
Do you see it influencing your work at all?
yes, it's an amazing outlet. Just like I guess if I wasn't playing football, I would be, going to the gym. I'd be running on a treadmill, so I would have the outlet either way. But this particular outlet allows me to scream at the top of my lungs, to run up and down the field in exhilaration, and so and then the piece I love the most is the community, is the team, and the way that we have our highs and lows, ups and downs, and we have to figure it out together. I love that. And I've noticed so many things that translate from an athletic team to a corporate team. And the things that I see in the corporate world that can be translated to athletics. When the goal is our goal is to win, to win, to win, from a science standpoint and from a practical standpoint in the corporate world, yeah, the bottom line is important, but there are so many other things that need to be put into place before we get to that bottom line. What does the cohesiveness of the team look like? How do we engage with one another? Is it a safe environment or is it a toxic environment? All of those things impact the bottom line. So when our goal is just to make a whole lot of money from a corporate standpoint, or just to win, we're missing out on a whole lot of other dynamics that make up that entire, puzzle. So yeah, so I've seen a lot of translatable things that I'm anxious to write about. It's like, oh, I've got to.
It reminds me of when I was at university, and I was there as a mature age student of a mum. She was 7 years old when I started university, and she would come to some lectures and things like that. But I formed a soccer team, and I'd never played soccer at all in my life. I mean, back when I was little, girls didn't play soccer anyway. But so I pulled together this soccer team, and it was a mixed soccer team, and I was probably oldest, I guess, because I was mature age. There might have been someone, and a guy used to be a policeman, so he might have been not my age, but close enough than the others who were in their early mid-20s. And just your story just reminded me of that. And we were called the Wallies, which was one of my nicknames at school.
Oh.
And I don't think we ever won, but it was exhilarating to get out there at lunchtime, and we were working as a team. I'd never played soccer at all in my life. I didn't know the rules, but I was running around kicking the ball. But there was something about the power in my legs that I was loving, the feel of the power in my legs doing the short quick jumps offs to get to somewhere. And so
Yes.
I just remember this experience, and then there was this. I remember I got a bit rough and tumbled sometimes, which you don't do in soccer. But all of a sudden, I found this very was it would you call it aggressive? I don't know, maybe. It just was really, it just, I was like, I was willing to be physical, just get up in front and not fight, but really nudge in on it. It's a soccer game. We're meant to use our feet, but all of a sudden I'm just all body into it. And it was just astounding and wonderful. I'll never forget that. The fact that we all were individually stretching ourselves while
Mm,
also trying to learn to work together within the team.
yes.
And it was just such a proudful period to have for this time that we had these lunchtime soccers in the competition. I went and bought us all medals, and on the last day, I turned up with the whole team and gave them all medals.
Oh.
I don't know if they've still got it, but it's just it kind of that's just what it. We didn't win anything, but we won ourselves and we won our medal, and we worked
Yes.
together, and the connection from it. It's just an amazing experience. So I get where you're coming from there. And you
Well,
reminded me, thank you, of a lovely memory.
I love that so much. I didn't realize we had that in common. Well, one of the definitions of joy from the American Psychological Association uses the word exhilaration. So it's an exhilaration of the spirit. And I absolutely feel that when I'm, engaging, when I'm out there, even if I'm on the sidelines, which has been the case a lot lately because I'm injured. But but I just the exhilaration of being on the sidelines and seeing the team play out the things that we've been working on. And so I am able to sort of, and one of the things I talk to my clients about a lot is what's your barometer? What's your baseline for joy? When do you know you're experiencing it? When do you know you're above that line? And when do you know you're below that line? And so this has given me a new way to sort of examine joy in different contexts. So I see how I'm feeling on the field, and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, this is like I'm up here. If I am working on a project or working with a team in the corporate realm, um, it is so much more noticeable for me if I'm experiencing joy or not because I've really sort of raised the bar on on what the joy experience is like. So.
Do you think you've raised your bottom level barometer measure of joy? Like, do you think your homeostasis is like at the same level? Or is it moved or shifted? What do you think?
I
It's
think it's
your
shifted.
experience of you, all right? That's
Yeah. Well, I definitely I've raised it because I've understood the range of possibility that I have. It sort of has it's opened my eyes to like, whoa, so you actually can be up here. And right here is fine, but there is a possibility to actually be up here. And not that it's you've just got to be way up here with joy all the time. That's not realistic. But understanding when you have been settling and when there's possibilities to rise a little bit higher in the quality of your life, it's eye-opening. Like, wow, because one of the first questions I got from a lot of people when I decided to play professional football was, how are you going to find the time to do that? And it's such an it's a funny question to me because how do you find the time to do anything you do? How do you find the time? How do I find the time to sit on this podcast with you? You find the time for the things, there's two things that you really love and that are important to you, and you find the time for things that you know you're going to be in trouble if you don't do it. You've got to show up for work, you've got to show up, you've got to do some, these different things, and sometimes those are the things that we allow to overshadow what we love and what we actually want to do. And so what I've learned is I am giving myself permission to not put those other things to the side, but to actually pull them in and integrate them into the whole of my life. And it forces me to make some decisions about, well, where do you want to spend your time? What's important to you? And so for some people, adding football to that felt like, wow, she's already doing so much. But I'm already somebody who exercises, who engages in some sort of outlet. So I'm choosing a different outlet.
Yeah, yeah, just shifted focus.
Yes.
So my next question does not have to be around joy, because I'm inclined to think that you might land there. So I'm going, maybe where else is this? And that is the impact that you've had already in your career. What do you think it might be, whether it's publicly known or not?
Hmm. This is probably less publicly known. Um, as a professor in a PhD program, I have had to be an advocate for students. And from the standpoint that there are always academics who they came through their own academic experience, experiencing hazing and abuse and marginalization, and we're going to put you through a whole lot to prove so you can prove yourself. And while some of that is important, absolutely want to know that the students that are going through, um, that they have the academic rigor, to do the work that they're going to be doing. At the same time, there's a line. There's a point at which it just becomes, I'm just being cruel. I'm just hazing the student. And I have, in many cases, stepped in and have been an advocate for students, who I know have done diligent, amazing work, and don't even know what is trying to pull them down, or don't know the magnitude of the power that's behind, some of the faculty who are just bound and determined to make it difficult for them. So I will go behind closed doors, have conversations with those colleagues, and if it means in the middle of a dissertation defense, which I have one of those today, um, standing up for a student, um, I'll do that. And so that whole human dignity thing, making sure that people are treated with dignity and respect, crosses all lines of everything that I do. And so what I don't speak on often is when students are being treated in a certain way that I don't feel matches human dignity. I'm going to speak up and I'm going to stand up for them, and I'm going to have conversations with that student, and coach them around how to stand up for themselves and how to find their voice and how to know that this situation is not okay. It's not an ethical situation. This is not how things are supposed to happen. So that's I think I've had a huge impact in the academic realm with my students from that standpoint.
Lovely. So what's the population been like that you've been working in? Has it been a mixture of everyone, or leaning one way or another? I'm just trying to put what you've been doing into context.
Sure. So when I was at the first university, when I got my job there, that was my first full tenure track faculty position, and this was Mercer University in Atlanta, and it was primarily, um, the actually our faculty was we had a beautiful faculty of about 15 people, and it was a diverse group of faculty. I thought this is, academic heaven. Like, wow, this is, and that was how I started. So this was the world that I was a part of. And our student body, um, I would probably say 50% African American Black population. And then the rest were a combination, probably primarily white, but then also a few other, cultural backgrounds sprinkled in there. So I had a really great experience of a diverse, doctoral program that I was a part of. And that was amazing because the research studies that come from a really diverse group are just rich. There's just so many different perspectives that are coming to the table. So that was the first environment. The second environment is a little bit less culturally diverse. I am one of probably very few faculty of color on campus, but definitely in my department, it's me. As far as woman, it's me. It's our students are probably, this is a pretty awesome, are probably a nice diverse mix, similar to the other university. So we have a student body in terms of our doctoral program that is pretty diverse and ranging throughout the country. Um, so that's pretty much the backdrop.
Okay. So moving straight into ethics now. I know you said the word not long ago. Now we're going to go there. So Sarah, how do you see it playing out in your working life? In maybe give us a particular example and show us or talk to us about how it looks in ethics in relation to your decision making and how it shows up.
Right. Yeah, it's my one of the things I loved about my PhD program, and it's called Leadership for the Advancement of Learning and Service. So our first entire year was about leadership, and not just corporate leadership, but Gandhi and some of the leaders that were grounded in morality and
Mhm,
justice.
mhm.
So we had that, and then second year was on learning the brain, how the brain operates, and the last year was on service, what we give back to the world. And in that program, they really introduced the idea of your north. What is that thing that you always go back to no matter what, that kind of lays the foundation for how you make decisions, for what you value. And mine has always been human dignity. And when I was working at Marquette University, it's a Jesuit university, and they have some pretty cool logos and slogans and values. And one of them was cherish the dignity of each individual. And that has really probably been the best way to define the lens through which I make decisions, the lens through which I determine, is this ethical? Is this not ethical? Are we cherishing the dignity of each individual? I found myself in meetings in which that's not happening, and the person who's not in the room is being talked about or treated in a manner that's not appropriate. And I will raise that question. Is this human dignity? Is this what we're doing? And so I asked that question out loud to colleagues. I asked that question internally to myself. So that is how I make decisions. One huge decision I had to make. I was, and this is more on a personal level, in the process of buying a home. And this was my fourth home. So when I was in my 20s and my parents said, figure out life. One of the things I did was bought my first house when I was 23. And so I have figured out that process. This last time I was going about buying a home, I was divorced. I had my daughter. My son had already moved off to college. So it was just me and my daughter, and we're buying this house. And we had comments like, oh, that's a lot of house for just the two of you. Just all kinds of comments. And I qualified, I had the income, I had the credit, all the things you're supposed to have. But throughout the entire process was doubt. I would get a phone call. Yeah, we're not going to be able to approve you for this loan. Why not? Yeah, you're just a high risk applicant. What does that mean? And so the whole time I'm thinking, am I being treated with human dignity? Is this the way that it's supposed to go? This was a 6 month process in which they reached out to me probably about 3 or 4 times to say the loan is not approved. And every time I asked why, well, let us go back and look at the paperwork again.
Mhm.
And they never stood on it. They never came back to say, yeah, so here's why. They just disappeared and the process continued. And then I'd get another call eventually. So the house was getting ready to close. I was getting ready to go sign the papers. And believe it or not, I had still not been approved. And I'm waiting, we're 6 months in, and I knew that where the location was to sign the final papers, I knew that it was going to be a certain amount of money to close on the house. So I said, I'm going anyway. I'm just going to show up anyway. And on my way there, I'm driving and I get a call saying, congratulations, you've been approved for the home. And I mind you, I will also say that I cited the fair housing policy. Every time I ask, so what's the problem? There is a fair housing policy. There's a fair, that exists. And I think saying that because I knew what was in the law, they backed off. What happened after I closed the house, the woman who was handling the processing, said, I have to say, I am so glad that you refused to accept any of those denials because most people think they have to abide by it. They don't ask questions. They cry, they lose the house, they move on. And I stood to lose a lot of my down payment on the house. So I would have
Mm,
lost a lot of money. And she said, you standing firm, you are the first person I've ever seen do that. And because you did that, you were able they had no defense and they had to let you get the house. So the when I have to think about, again, it's that human dignity piece, whether it is, am I being treated with human dignity? Am I
mm,
treating others? And am I witnessing whether or not people are being treated
mm,
with dignity? So I'm glad I stood my ground. But if I had been a first-time homeowner, I might not have known.
mm.
And so how many other people are being mistreated through the process,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, kudos to you that you got through that. So,
Yes.
the professional space, has there been a challenge that you've been faced with? And give us a specific example and how you went through it and what the outcome was.
Yeah. Well, and I wrote about this in one of your publications. I don't know
Ah,
if you saw this.
the case studies board.
Yes,
That was
yes.
the beauty of a case study, that one.
Yeah, that one was pretty interesting. But what happened was by I don't know, probably 5 years, 4 years into my business, I have a coach training company, and it's an ICF accredited certifying coaches program. And I was looking to partner with a university and, to offer the coach training to their colleagues, their students, their local community. They loved the proposal. And the entire room, I was presenting before the board of leaders for that university, and they all loved it. Yes, let's do it. The answer is yes. The president of the university said, why don't we have lunch, talk about this? It seemed like my team really loved it. Let's sit down and discuss. So we went to this local, I guess it was like a corporate club where people pay for membership, and you're in this high rise and you're watching the view of the city, and it was high end. It was amazing. And we're walking in, and I'm excited because I'm like, finally, the deal is gonna work. I'm getting my food, and he's standing behind me, and he makes a comment about my body, and I can't even say what the comment is because it was so vulgar. And I was like, whoa. In my mind, I'm saying whoa really loudly. The real me is just sitting there like, what do I say? Oh my gosh, this is what? I
Mm.
ignored it. And we sat down and he wanted to reiterate. And he did say that, the meeting went really well. You were really impressive. My team is saying yes. Somebody just texted me, like, please let this happen. And he said, so I have a proposition for you. He said, if you're, my wife is out of town, if you're willing to come over and we can close this deal today.
He was
And
that overt about it. That was
that
astounding.
overt about it. And we can start with a financial contribution, and we can start today. And I was appalled. I mean, I was like, are you serious? And for it to be so just casually, I'm just like, how often does this happen? Um, you
Yeah,
know, and
madness.
so it well, and you would think, does it take a lot of ethics to walk away from a situation like that? Um, it's not even part of it is how embarrassing the moment is, the shame of that moment, the rage that you're feeling in that moment. Um, that was the last time I had a conversation with that person. And, even after I left, there was no follow-up. He didn't reach out.
Mm.
Any team members that I made connections with at that time, they had also sort of cut me off and blocked me. And I thought, gosh, what did he tell them? Because it was a sudden block, we're done.
Yeah.
So I had to make some decisions with regards to, my own trauma around that, and that this wasn't the first man that had made advances in my
Mhm.
professional career. It also happened in my role as a faculty member with a more senior faculty member. It had happened in my first job outside of college, where my supervisor would come into my office and make these really inappropriate statements. With a senior administrator at another university who, would kind of give flirtatious comments. So by that point in my career, I was like, so is this how it goes as a professional woman? Like, what in the world? And so I had to figure out what my strategy is, what my approach was. And I first made my decision from a place of trauma. No longer will I do business with men. No longer will I directly engage with men on business deals. And I have a male COO, and he agreed. He said, look, I will be the person. I will sit in front of those conversations. I will be the one to lead those conversations. But I did realize that is a trauma response, because am I really going to exclude men from my entire professional circle for the rest of my life? And so I've had to learn um, my language, my boundary language. I had to learn my posture and what I was um, going to accept or ignore or not accept. So it was a learning um, around how to create those boundaries and how to stand by those boundaries. Um, but yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, yeah. And those boundaries are they are a learning in motion. Like I recall, I'll come back at you. One of my early roles was working in local government, and then I left. I didn't like the politics of the place, so I was leaving, and I was full-time uni anyway. And there, on my last day, one of the elders of that particular community brought me some flowers and happened to catch me in the car park and gave me these beautiful flowers, and then invited me to his place for lunch. And I thought his wife was going to be there actually, but she wasn't. And he said, "Oh, you want to have a look at the house?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So, and he took me to the bedroom, and I went, "No, I don't
Oh,
want to see your bedroom." And then he sent, in that same visit there in the bedroom as I was walking out, because I didn't want to be there, he sent me a photo on my phone, to my phone, of himself.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I just went, "Holy jolly." Like,
The boldness.
it's not like I'm an innocent, but that really grossed me out that he would
Yeah.
do that, and I just thought, wow, I didn't pick up on any of this at all. I really thought he was a respectable man of the city, actually, and
That's what gets me, Wendy Ann, is if anybody knew who this was, who I
yeah,
was talking about, they would be shocked,
yeah.
because he presents himself like a respectable man.
Yeah, yeah. And I've never spoken of that actually because I just didn't want to, but he 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 would be long gone now. I don't live in the city anymore, and I know he'd be long gone because he was elderly. So
Okay.
no, so many years ago, he's definitely not around anymore. But still, I wouldn't shame him. There's a question in that as well, isn't there? Why would I still protect someone who
Mm.
behaved so inappropriately? Have you ever considered that?
So I have considered that a lot. And anytime, I see him on TV and accepting an award and, um, what I've concluded is that my protection is not of him at all, but more so of myself, because what happens when people speak out on these things, it becomes their entire platform. It becomes who they are known for. And there's so much more to me than that
Exactly.
situation or situations like that. And it's, yeah. So for me, it's protecting myself and my livelihood and allowing the authenticity of my own work to be the thing that shines and that people know me for,
Mm.
which is really, unfortunate because you do want people to face the consequences of their behaviors. I have to rest in the fact that, you know what, he is facing consequences. There are natural consequences that catch up to us. So I have to be okay with that. Every time I hear of a situation where somebody speaks out about something that happened years ago, decades ago, um, I get it. And I think that it's probably because it was more difficult for them to move on than they thought it would be. Um, but I'm grateful for the coping tools and the all the things that I have to allow myself to move on. But do I talk about it? Absolutely, because what I didn't know as a young professional was that this was on the table as part of the experience. I had no
Mm.
idea. I wish in college when I was about to be off to my first professional job that this was a conversation, a frank conversation that either our professors or a mentor in the school or my parents could have had with me. My parents would have had no clue about this,
No.
but that those are so I have the conversations because I want people to be aware as opposed to a deer in headlights, and the way they address it is going to be dependent on what their values are and who they are as a person. But I want people to be aware that this is something that can happen, and it doesn't have to be sexual advances. It could be just being condescending, somebody treating you and just diminishing you in any way
Absolutely.
is the thing that I want people to be prepared for, to at least know it exists um, when they go out into the world.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a challenging situation because there's like, I mean, I never had concerns. I never wanted to kind of bother with getting involved. Nothing happened. I just like nothing was ever going to happen other than it was put in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening, and I'm out of here. So, but still, it was inappropriate. It didn't leave any lasting marks on me, but it was inappropriate, and I was a bit shocked and grossed out. But it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, how do you then, if I was to continue working in that area of work, then what is my responsibility then in that space to make sure that other people are safe, that
Hmm.
there isn't someone still being so condescending that it's harmful to people? How do I go about, people who try and intimidate others and things like that if I was in that same space? And I think then I would certainly feel that I had a certain responsibility to break the systemic nature of people just being silent,
Yes, absolutely.
turning the other way and letting people just get away with stuff for whatever reason that they do.
Yeah, and I have found myself in the position of advocate in just I think I bring it with me because every every context that I'm in, people will reach out to me, or I'll be the one to speak up on the behalf of whatever other people are experiencing. So I I embrace that because if nobody is going to speak up, then if it's on me, then sure, it's fine, I'll do it, and that's another reason why creating the autonomy that I have in my life is so important because, as I am, Institute of Coaching, um, professor. I have my own coaching practice. I have a coaching school. I am a scientist with Ezra coaches. So I've diversified what I do so much that if I have to speak out in one of these contexts to the point where they're like, you know what, we don't need you here anymore, I'm not so dependent on that one thing that it risks my livelihood. And that might be the not be the case for my colleagues who really are depending on that. And so I am totally okay with being the sacrificial lamb to speak up on behalf of what needs to happen. But I've seen this on every single, now I think about it, context that I've been a part of. If there is a concern or an issue, it's not always necessarily a big thing or but it's just, it could be anything, the way that our PhD dissertation process is working, that doesn't work with us, for us, whatever it is, it could be as minimal as that. I'm definitely willing to chime in and say, so let's talk about this. Let's rework this.
Yeah, yeah. Kudos to you. Well done. So thinking forward now, projecting a little bit, what would you wish for your impact or legacy to be in your life's work?
That's interesting. Because I'm like in it. I'm in the trenches. So like, what is the outcome of this? you know, Mindset shifts. I would love to be a part of a collective social mindset shift um, that allows people to lean into their well-being and to truly care about the well-being of others in their leadership, in their parenting, in whatever situation they're in. Um, I want to be that voice that echoes, are we well? Are we okay? And to be able to ground our decisions in that. Um, that's one big piece. And then, I mean, normalizing, I say this, I hesitate as I say this because I know people are like, huh, everybody wants to be happy and joyful. But really, normalizing joy is essential, and not being ashamed to dive into that, because I think what's tied to our joy is our purpose, and what's tied to our joy is the richness of our connections that we have with other people. And so just having that as a foundation can create so much change, um, can be the birthplace of so much empowerment for people who really don't have a voice. And so to me, that's really essential. How do we normalize joy as something that is essential for our lives and our societies?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So, what do you think then is one of the most pressing issues that you see for you in your professional context?
Loneliness. Um, and it's interesting because I wrote about loneliness in this book here because, singleness, loneliness, that's one of the things people fear. And the Surgeon General of the United States, the previous Surgeon General of the United States, declared that the pandemic, modern day psychological pandemic, is loneliness. Um, and I think that translates to a lot of things that can create problems in our society. It's tied to depression. It's tied to a lack of connection and isolation, and um, those are things that hinder growth and progress in individuals as well as in um, society. So when I think about the supervisors or the leaders that have been a part of my world that have probably been the most damaging, the most toxic, they I've observed that they are experiencing profound loneliness. And that they are projecting their own fear and their own pain around that loneliness onto the people that they're leading. So we like to think that these human experiences, loneliness, depression, trauma, are separate from the leadership experience, and they're not. They are not. And so that is why these concepts are so important to me. But that, I think, is one of the biggest issues, and what, it keeps us disconnected from ourselves, from other people. We feel guilty for pursuing this emptiness, like filling this emptiness that we have, and we fill it with other things. If I had, well, I'll just say briefly, one of my models around joy is the ethics of joy model. And it really is about how we make decisions that are rooted in our state of well-being. And if our state of well-being is low, or if it's languishing, the illustration I've created is that we're drawing from the languishing well. And so we find ways to fulfill that emptiness with an empty well, with things like that just don't, that are not sustainable. So maybe alcohol, or maybe speaking to somebody, not a glass of wine, but a lot of alcohol. Speaking
Right, I do
speaking
not feel bad about my up and coming
Oh
glass
no,
of wine.
it's me too. It's me too. But no, but it's speaking to somebody in a condescending way and finding a sense of exhilaration from that. And then we can have a conversation about whether or not that's true exhilaration. But whatever people get out of putting other people down, those are empty ways of fulfilling that the pain.
Yeah.
The flourishing well, when we pull from that, those are things that actually nourish us. Those are things that actually help our joy grow, that feed our well-being. And so when we can pull from that, our decisions and our ethical processes really come from that place, as opposed to the languishing place. And so when people are struggling with loneliness, and they're not aware and they're not working on themselves, they tend to draw from that languishing well. And every decision that they make is rooted in that place.
Mhm. So, how are you going to switch that?
Magic wand. I I think it's important to change the national conversation around leadership. And I feel like I'm in exactly the right place. I talked about how it was hard to change my identity from professor of research to professor of leadership. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, because I have an opportunity to steer the conversation of leadership into a direction that's more grounded in humanity than the bottom line, or productivity and so forth. How do and this is, I'm not the only one doing this, obviously. I mean, we are starting to have a realization that our humanity is an essential part of our leadership. There's no lines that we can draw between what we experience in our personal lives and our professional life. We can try to put on a facade and mask what's going on in our personal lives, but it comes out in one way or another. So really, I think that the way that I hope I can be a part of that is driving the global conversation on leadership, and integrating that with our humanity. So that can be verbal, it can be through my writings, it can be through working with coaches who then are engaging in conversations with their clients about their humanity.
So, earlier, we're coming near to the end of this, but earlier you mentioned that you nearly maybe went into study forgiveness.
Yes.
Did you ever end up studying forgiveness at all?
I did not. However, um, because I'm a part of the Institute of Coaching, I started getting publicity from other Harvard entities. And there was a conference called the a couples. It was like it was for psychologists, and it was a conference that fully immersed into couples and relationships. So I went to that, and I followed the tracks that were about forgiveness.
Mhm.
And I will never forget one of the sessions that I attended about forgiveness and the rigorous notes I took on that. And it really reignited why I was so interested in this area. And I've also since partnered with a researcher who focuses on forgiveness. So I found ways to immerse myself in that without necessarily getting a master's degree in it. But it is still something that is very near and dear to me.
Yeah, I mean, I ask you that because it's part of your journey, but I've been thinking about this, people saying sorry. I've been thinking
Mm,
about that lately and how, um, you want to accept someone apologizing, but how unfulfilling it can be if it's what I've been thinking about. Why is it unfulfilling? Why is it that I feel the need to say an extra something? And that extra something after an apology being given is the impact of whatever they're apologizing for.
mm,
And I was thinking, why do I feel inside myself compelled to say the impact? I don't say the impact to me, I leave that bit out, but I say the impact to whatever else it was, right?
right.
And I've been thinking about that and I'm going, yeah, I forgive you, but I've got to say something extra here. And I'm going, why is that? And it's
Uh,
because it's half an apology. The apology is that I'm really sorry I screwed up, but there's no acknowledgement of the impact. And I'm
yeah.
thinking if someone apologized and acknowledged that there was probably an impact of some sort to me or just to a process or something, that would probably feel extraordinarily fulfilling. And I would just go, yeah, thanks for that. And it'd be done.
It's interesting because this is the dynamic, and this look, I could study this. We talk about leadership and followership. From the standpoint of apologies, you have the apologizer and the apologizee. And the dynamics that are happening on each side. What it took for the person to apologize to come forth. Was it authentic? Was it genuine? Was it just to get this conversation over with? And for the person receiving the apology, what do they say in response? How do
Mm.
they, as you're saying, one of the things I've noticed about myself is when somebody apologizes, I'm realizing, oh, I don't have to fight this anymore. They just apologize. And I'm so used to having to defend myself and having to stand up for myself when somebody honors what I'm feeling and it's a genuine apology. I'm like, oh, what's now? What's next? I don't have to fight. I have to put down my defenses. And it's just it's like getting a compliment when you're not used to compliments. Like, what do you say?
Yeah. And I'm listening to your story and I'm going, how wonderful it is that it's being acknowledged, that you're being fully acknowledged in the apology. I'm like, yeah, I understand that you'd be going, oh, now the fight's over. And I'm going, oh, I want to hear that. I want to hear that. So it can
It
just be,
is wonderful.
and I don't have to educate. It actually had an impact, this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just that it happened and it screwed up, it actually
There was a there was an
stuff.
impact. Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably a domino effect that impacted other things. I think one of the most profound things I learned sitting in one of those forgiveness sessions and based after that, I just started following the researchers was that just because somebody apologizes, how do you empower the person who's been hurt to choose their their forgiveness style, timing,
Mhm.
response, because we are told often in more spiritual realms that we are to forgive. And that if we don't forgive, and then this part is more psychological. If we don't forgive, then we're just carrying that burden and we're not releasing it and we're holding on to it. So this particular researcher challenged that notion and said that she gave an example of a husband and wife, and the husband was unfaithful. This is to your point about the impact. And he was unfaithful. And when the wife found out about it, so many things opened up for her. Well, that explains why when my mother was dying, he wasn't there. He was with his mistress. That explains, and she just had answers for everything. And so he apologized and they worked on counseling together. There was a particular dinner they went to. It was their anniversary dinner. The waitress came to the table and introduced herself. It was the name of the mistress from
No.
same name, different person, but it was a trigger. And she burst into tears. And the husband turned to her and he said, I apologize. How do I? And so when they went to counseling, the wife told him, I can forgive you for 90% of this. The other 10%, when I was with my mother alone while she was dying, where and she named all the different scenarios, I can never forgive you for. I was like,
Whoa.
and the therapist said that her honesty was important for the marriage, that to pretend that the other 10% didn't have the impact and that she was able to just kind of, and at the end of the day they said maybe one day I can, but right now that's not where I am. So 90% yes, 10% no. And I thought, oh, that's interesting.
How empowering is that, though?
Yeah. Right, to acknowledge the impact and to be able to say that no, that's still
Yeah, that's still alive. Sorry,
yeah,
that's not dealt with.
right.
We got more to do yet.
And when you acknowledge it, you get to deal with it.
Yeah.
But if you pretend you're okay and you say, well, I'm supposed to forgive and I'm just going to do it, it it doesn't give you the time that it takes to genuinely heal and genuinely forgive in all those different areas that are, you see why I wanted the master's in forgiveness? This is
But, yeah, but you know, even if you plant relational ethics in that, it's like this, there's this background to feeling obligated to forgive people when you're not ready.
yes. Yes.
And so this lady's experience and recognizing that she's 90% there, but hell, you're not getting the whole 100% yet. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I'm like, yes.
Right.
How wonderful is that? And how different is that from feeling the obligation to keep walking in forgiveness that's not really there, which the fire's continually burning until you deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about false positivity, and that's probably one of the best examples of false
Yeah.
positivity. I'm pretending I'm good. I'm pretending, you know, and you're not. Yeah.
Well, Pamela, do you have a last word or two you'd like to leave us with as we close out now?
Hmm. There is a lot, and there's always a lot going on in the world, but we're in it. We read about history and we know things that have happened in the past. Well, now we are living the history that our, those who come after us are going to be reading about. And I want us to remember our humanity in all of this. There are things that we have no control over. And I always ask people to start with the question, where is your power in this situation? Where is it? Is it just taking a deep breath?
Mhm.
Is it taking a walk? Where does it start? Start there, start small, and grow it from that point. Sometimes
Mhm.
when we look at the bigness of what's happening in the world, we get overwhelmed. And I like to bring us back to ourselves. Where's my power in this situation? And I'm going to start there, and I'm going to take the steps forward from that place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this chat.
Thank you. This has been great.